Good morning. Happy Saturday. Happy slow-moving morning. Let me just tell you, I had trouble getting out of my own way this morning after a long night. Okay, all right, January 15th. Joseph interprets two dreams, Genesis 40, 1 through 23, which was 1887 or 1721 BC. Sometime later, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker offended their royal master. Pharaoh became angry with these two officials, and he put them in prison where Joseph was, in the palace of the captain guard. They remained in prison for quite some time, and the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, who looked after them. While they were in prison, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker had a dream one night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph saw them the next morning, he noticed they both looked upset. "Why do you look so worried today?" he asked them. And they replied, "We both had dreams last night, but no one can tell us what they mean." "Interpreting dreams is God's business," Joseph replied. "Go ahead and tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream first. "In my dream," he said, "I saw a grapevine in front of me. The vine had 3 branches that began to bud and blossom, and soon it produced a cluster of ripe grapes. I was holding Pharaoh's wine cup in my hand, so I took a cluster of grapes and squeezed the juice into the cup. Then I placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." "This is what the dream means," Joseph said. "The 3 branches represent 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you as your position as chief cupbearer. And please remember me and do me a favor when things go well for you. Mention me to Pharaoh so that he might let me out of this place, for I was kidnapped from my homeland, the land of the Hebrews, and now I'm here in prison, but I did nothing to deserve it." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given the first dream such a positive interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I had a dream too. In my dream, there were 3 baskets of white pastries stacked on my head. The top basket contained all kinds of pastries for Pharaoh, but the birds came and ate them from the basket on my head." "This is what your dream means," Joseph told them. "The 3 baskets also represent 3 days. 3 days from now, Pharaoh will lift you up and impale your body on a pole. Then the birds will come and peck away at your flesh." Can you imagine being that guy? This guy over here just heard that he's going to get his position back as wine cup bearer and all is well. And this guy instead finds out he's going to be impaled on a pole and have his flesh plucked off by the birds. Such good news. Pharaoh's birthday came 3 days later, and he prepared a banquet for all of his officials and staff. He summoned his chief cupbearer and chief baker to join the other officials. He then restored the chief cupbearer to his former position so he could again hand Pharaoh his cup. But Pharaoh impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had predicted when he interpreted his dream. Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. Excuse me. The death of Isaac, Genesis 35, 28 through 29, 1886 or 1720 BC. Isaac lived for 180 years. Then he breathed his last and died at a ripe old age, joining his ancestors in death. And his sons, Esau and Jacob, buried him. Pharaoh's dreams, Genesis 41, 1 through 36, 1885 or 1719 BC. 2 years had passed since Joseph had interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker. 2 full years later, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing on the bank of the Nile River. In his dream, he saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and began grazing in the marsh. Then he saw 7 more cows come up behind them from the Nile, but these were scrawny and thin. These cows stood healthy. What the heck? I'm adding words that aren't even there. These cows stood beside the fat cows on the riverbank. Then the scrawny, thin cows ate the 7 healthy, fat cows. At this point in the dream, Pharaoh woke up. But he fell asleep again and had a second dream. This time, he saw 7 heads of grain, plump and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. The 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were shriveled and withered by the east wind, and these thin heads swallowed up the 7 plump, well-formed heads. Then Pharaoh woke up again and realized it was a dream. The next morning, Pharaoh was very disturbed by the dreams, so he called for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. When Pharaoh told them his dreams, Not one of them could tell him what they meant. Finally, the king's chief cupbearer spoke up. "Today I have been reminded of my failure," he told Pharaoh. "Some time ago you were angry with the chief baker my word, chief baker and me, and you imprisoned us in the palace of the captain guard. One night the chief baker and I each had a dream, and each dream had its own meaning. There was a young Hebrew man with us in prison who was a slave of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he told us what each of our dreams meant, and everything happened just as he predicted. I was restored to my position as cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on a pole. Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once, and he was quickly brought from prison. After he shaved and changed his clothes, he went in and stood before Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream last night, and no one here can tell me what it means. But I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it. I can't say interpreted. Interpreted it. That. It's literally the most basic word, and I can't pronounce it. "It is beyond my power to do this," Joseph replied, "but God can tell you what it means and set you at ease." So Pharaoh told Joseph his dream. "In my dream," he said, "I was standing on the bank of the Nile River, and I saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up from out of the river and begin grazing in the marsh grass. But then I saw 7 sick-looking cows, scrawny and thin, come up after them. I've never seen such sorry-looking animals in all the land of Egypt. These thin, scrawny cows ate the 7 fat cows, but afterward you wouldn't have known it, for they were still as thin and scrawny as before. Then I woke up. In my dream, I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were blighted, shriveled, and withered by the east wind. And the shriveled heads swallowed the 7 healthy heads. I told these dreams to the magicians, but no one could tell me what they mean." Joseph responded, "Both of Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God is telling Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 healthy heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin, scrawny cows that come up later and the 7 thin heads of grain withered by the east wind represent 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have described it, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The next 7 years will be a period of great prosperity throughout the land of Egypt. But afterward there will be 7 years of famine so great that all the prosperity will be forgotten in Egypt. Famine will destroy the land. This famine will be so severe that even the memory of the good years will be erased. As for having 2 similar dreams, it means that these events have been decreed by God, and he will soon make them happen. Therefore, Pharaoh should find an intelligent and wise man to put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh should appoint supervisors over the land and let them collect 1/5 of all the crops during the 7 good years, having them gather all the food produced in the good years that are just ahead and bring it to Pharaoh's storehouses, store it away, and guard it there, so there will be food in the cities. That way there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come up to the land of Egypt. Otherwise, the famine will destroy the land." Joseph made ruler over Egypt. Genesis 41:37 through 57. Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, "Can we find anyone else like this man so obviously filled with the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or as wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all of my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on the throne, will have a rank higher than yours." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in fine linen clothing and hung a gold chain around his neck. Then he had Joseph ride in the chariot reserved for his second in command. And wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, "Kneel down." So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all of Egypt. And Pharaoh said to him, "I am Pharaoh, but no one will lift a hand or a foot in the entire land of Egypt without your approval." Then Pharaoh gave Joseph a new Egyptian name, Zaphanath-Paneah. And he also gave him a wife whose name was Asenath. She was the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On. So Joseph took charge of the entire land of Egypt. He was 30 years old when he began serving in the court of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. When Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, he inspected the entire land of Egypt. As predicted, for 7 years the land produced bumper crops. During those years, Joseph gathered all the crops grown in Egypt and stored the grain from the surrounding fields in the cities. Oh my word. He piled up huge amounts of grain like sand on the seashore. Finally, he stopped keeping records because there was too much to measure. During this time, before the first time of the famine years, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On. Joseph named his older son Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family. Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief. As at last the 7 years of bumper crops throughout the land of Egypt came to an end. The 7 years of famine began just as Joseph had predicted. The famine also struck all the surrounding countries, but throughout Egypt there was plenty of food. Eventually, however, this famine spread throughout the land of Egypt as well. And when the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, he told them, Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you. So, with severe famine everywhere, Joseph opened up the storehouses and distributed the grain to the Egyptians. For the famine was severe throughout the land of Egypt. And people from all around came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe throughout the world. I like that story. I've always enjoyed that story. Next. Good night. Tomorrow we get to talk about Joseph's brothers coming to see him. I always notice that too, Faith. There's something about the age of 30 that holds some importance, right? All right, let's do Trim Healthy Mama 100 Days of Inspiration. Let me get a little sip of my coffee. Maybe I stop yawning. This coffee is good. It's buttered rum. There ain't no rum in my coffee, don't you worry. But it's buttered rum flavor and it's good. All right. Day 15 from Nancy. Why are we scared? Why are we so scared to trust God? Why are we so scared to trust Him with our lives when He is the God of the universe? Why do we think we can make better decisions than God when He is omniscient, all-wise, all-knowing? I'm not condemning you. I'm guilty too. I wonder why many couples think that God could not provide another baby in their family. Is it because we trust ourselves rather than in our omnipotent, all-powerful God? Think about how many times we have prayed these lines in the Lord's Prayer. Give us this day our daily bread. Matthew 6:11. Do you ever notice that Jesus didn't teach us to pray, give us our monthly bread, or even our weekly bread? God wants us to learn to trust Him for today, knowing that He will be faithful again tomorrow. God only sent enough manna for one day to the Israelites in the wilderness. If they couldn't trust God that He would provide for the next day and gathered extra just in case, it bred worms and stank. Exodus 16:20. That's what God thinks about our lack of trust in Him. Let's pray with the hymn writer. Oh, for the grace to trust Him more. That's very true. One day, one step at a time, not months in advance. We trust Him for today. Pulling down strongholds. Sometimes it's not simply a donut we are fighting against. The lure of destructive foods can be powerful spiritual battle, like the one we read in 2 Corinthians 10:4. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God for pulling down of strongholds. Bringing our dietary weaknesses and food addictions before the one who is mighty to save is not a frivolous prayer topic. Don't stamp failure on your journey because of emotional eating issues. The one who leads you in this has all the strength you need for the climb and the fight. He knows your struggles. He wants you to turn to Him for strength when the foods and habits that have enslaved you seem stronger than your own willpower. The weapons we fight with are God's. They are not weak. If we take hold of them, we can conquer. Serene and Pearl. Trusting Him. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love, because love is also trust. In a love story, two people come together who were both betrayed in the past. This gives them a reason to be reluctant to the idea of love. This gives them a reason to never trust again. But despite what could hold them back, they fall deeper into love than they ever had before. They trust each other's love. This is what God expects of us. Everyone's been hurt, but every time God feels our pain, he is also hurt. He's been hurt more than anyone. He has been betrayed over and over again. But he will never betray us. His love comes with promises that we are to trust. And if we really love him, we will also trust him. That is faith. Okay. There we go. That's it for our daily devotion. Thank you for joining me this morning. I do plan on going live in a little bit, pending. I got to go wake the dog up and all that jazz and get things going. Oh my gosh. And clearly I need to finish my cup of coffee this morning. But I do plan to make, if I have all the ingredients, lemon bars. I need to figure out why my camera is so dark. I don't know why. So I have to mess with that. So I don't know when I'll be live this morning, but I do plan to. I just have some things to do. And then I will make lemon cheesecake bars this morning because that sounds absolutely delightful for this week. Some lemon cheesecake. So, okay. Thanks for joining me this morning. I hope it's a blessing to you. I hope to see you live in a little while for breakfast or for dessert or whatever you want to call it. But first, cup of coffee. Finish my coffee. Maybe I won't yawn so much during my video. So, okay, guys, I love you all. If I don't see you for breakfast, I hope you have a blessed day. Stay on plan today, for crying out loud. It's Saturday. You don't need to go off plan on a Saturday. If you feel like you're going to go off plan today, have yourself a yummy crossover and stick to it, mama, because it's worth it. All right, guys.